What's a scary science fact that the public knows nothing about? A CME, coronal mass ejection, is the most likely civilization ending disaster to come from space. The sun emits them regularly, and they hit the Earth every few hundred years. The last one occurred in the 1890s, but society at the time was less susceptible to the effects. Were one to hit the Earth today, it would basically destroy all the tech infrastructure on whichever side of the planet is facing the sun at the time. This would knock the affected hemisphere back into the stupid ages, and it would take decades to recover, altering the global balance of power forever. It's only a matter of time. We could mitigate the effects, but it would be expensive, so we haven't, and likely never will. At least, not until the problem becomes real to people. By then, it will be too late. This is a much more likely scenario than any asteroid impact. Yeah, unless the human race as a whole starts prioritizing survival and the future instead of profit, we are kinda just screwed every way possible in the future. Bananas could be gone within a year. We only grow one type of banana tree. If a specific infection occurs that kills that kind of tree, it would spread like wildfire, and we have no alternative. Apparently, this happened not so long ago. Airplanes are dynamically stable, but helicopters are dynamically unstable. That means if an airplane pilot lets go of the controls of a small plane with no autopilot, if it's correctly trimmed and balanced, it will keep flying level until it runs out of fuel. If a helicopter pilot lets go of the controls, in about 2.4 seconds, it will tip over to such a degree that it is unrecoverable. We can let go of one control, the collective, for a little while by frictioning it in place to change the radio, adjust something, scratch our nose, or whatever. But it's friction on, do the thing with the left hand, friction off, and hand back on the collective. We fly 3 seconds away from falling out of the sky all the time. Researchers have found viruses in the Arctic permafrost that have been frozen for thousands of years. One of these viruses, pythovirus, was dormant for 30,000 years until the researchers revived it and it infected the amoebas that were placed in the tank with it, which of course prevents a scary scenario. What happens when the ice melts away and viruses are released that haven't been in contact with humans for 10,000 plus years? The Demon Core was a spherical 6.2 kilogram, 14 pound, subcritical mass of plutonium, 89 millimeters, 3.5 inches in diameter, manufactured during World War II by the United States nuclear weapon development effort, the Manhattan Project, as a fissile core for an early atomic bomb. It was involved in two criticality accidents on August 21st, 1945, and May 21st, 1946, each of which killed a person. The Demon Core incidents were scary, but also largely due to human error and arrogance. There are weaponized strains of anthrax which can remain viable and dangerous for 40 plus years after release. In 1942, the UK tested an anthrax bomb on Grenard Island, killing a flock of sheep in days. Some died in hours. Examination showed that the spores could remain active for decades, and decontamination proved impossible at the time. The project was scrapped. Fast forward to 1981. An eco-terrorist group smuggled a sample off of the island and threatened the UK government with releasing it if the island wasn't decontaminated. The spores were still active and deadly. It took 4 years to plan and execute the cleanup using 280 tons of formaldehyde in a seawater solution and removing 7 hectares worth of soil to a depth of 3 feet, about 58,000 tons of topsoil, where the concentration was too high for the juice to do the job. The island was confirmed clean in 1990, 4 years after cleanup began. Heart muscle cells don't reproduce much in adults, roughly 1% per year. If you have an infarction or other stressor that kills those cells, then your heart won't be able to grow new cells to replace the dead ones. This is why patients with diseases like heart failure end up needing a heart transplant. Trying to get this process to happen is a major goal for many cardiac researchers. Approximately 60%, in some reports, of the world's population have the parasite Toxoplasma gondii in their brain. For a long time, it's been thought to have been a benign presence, but recent statistical research shows that it may have an impact on things like levels of anger and rates of accidents and side. When Gandhi is in rats, it changes their behavior so that they can find the smell of cat urine sexually appealing. So they find cats and get eaten. In the gut of the cat, the parasite can reproduce. I only recently learned that when you get sunburned, the burn isn't because of skin cell damage. The UV radiation damages the DNA. Then the skin cells decide to commit suicide and fall off so that the damaged DNA doesn't produce cancer. I'll never be mad at my skin peeling ever again. Prions are terrifying. They're basically zombies at a protein level. They're misshapen in such a way that causes them to misshape other proteins. Normal methods of disinfection don't work. This makes researching them a very tricky matter, as while most cases involve eating infected meat, mishandling prion samples is all it takes. Tricky part is, there is no treatment either. Once they get in you, they are 100% fatal. It has been a while since I studied them, so this picture may be incomplete, but I do know they are always fatal. If your dog swims in a lake after receiving a spot-on flea treatment, it absolutely decimates the invertebrate population. A large dog swimming in 8 Olympic swimming pools worth of water soon after treatment will leach enough neurotoxin to kill 50% of the lake's invertebrate population within 48 hours. When I say after, I mean relatively soon after, within, say, a day, to have an effect quite this devastating. The leaching does reduce over the month, but it's still there, and the effect of multiple dogs still allows for terrible buildup of chemicals. I never knew this was why, but I remember working in a vet clinic at the front desk, and they told us to always tell people not to let their dogs go for a swim in any body of water for at least a week after getting a flea treatment. I always assumed it was because the medicine would just wash off. A species of ant in the UK, probably other places as well, just not sure, farm aphids for honeydew. They actively shepherd them, move them underground when cold, and protect them from prey. Stroke them with their antennas to get them to produce enough honeydew, aka milk, and if they are running short on food, they will eat them. So many people will struggle with infertility. It's not talked about or really discussed in middle school or high school in health class. When it happens, it's such a shock to the families that they are completely unprepared. The numbers are going up as well. Statistically, 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, which is pretty high. But again, miscarriage is not discussed. The youngest persons who developed Alzheimer's were around 25 years old. One lady got diagnosed with it at 31 while pregnant. By the way, when you get the disease at like 65, it didn't suddenly begin. It has been creeping up and ravaging your brain for at least 20 years, if not more. You just didn't realize it because our brain is very good at compensating damages until it cannot. Basically, the day you lose yourself in the supermarket, it's too late. Your brain is mostly mush, and there is so far nothing you can do. That means if you are 40 to 60 years old and reading this, chances are that some of you already started to experience the onset of Alzheimer's brain degeneration. It's just not advanced enough for you to realize it. The human body temperature in developed countries is actually declining, and at the same time, global warming is increasing the temperature thresholds for many fungus types. This is leading to a whole new medical issue of fungus infecting humans, and its main source of protection, body temperature, is no longer working. That body temperature is a large reason for the success of mammals all over the world. After the KT extinction, the sun was blocked and cold-blooded species couldn't raise their body temperature to kill off infections in their bodies. There is ample evidence that after KT, that fungus spread all over the world in massive quantities, which leads many to believe this led to the ascendancy of mammals on Earth. Confined spaces. Be very careful of confined spaces. It's not just the tightness of the space, but also the type of space, especially on old ships. with a lot of rust. Opening up enclosed hatches and going into confined spaces can get you killed due to the lack of oxygen in those confined spaces. Others can also die from trying to rescue you. Take things slow, evaluate your surroundings, and don't be afraid to ask for help if you are unsure. Nutrition deficiencies, such as iron, vitamin C, have many symptoms that were uncovered in an experiment in residential schools that would have a class of indigenous children that would never get iron from foods or any intake. Another class would get the iron supplements, then they would compare the results. Some children would grow up with disease. A lot of the testing classes didn't survive. Those who did ended up with anemia. Results of the studies are well known to us: fatigue, pale skin, chest pain, tongue soreness, etc. The giant asteroids orbiting the sun have been mapped out. We know none of them will hit us in the next 100 or so years, so we're safe from world-ending disaster. But the small asteroids, the ones that can destroy whole cities, are too small to detect. One of those can show up at any moment, and wham! The Earth is hit by an asteroid that destroys all of Buenos Aires. The original Carrington event was in 1859, which was basically an intense geomagnetic storm that disrupted and knocked out telegrams, because that's all the technology there was to disrupt back then. Nowadays, we use electricity for virtually everything. If it hit now, the effect would be like an EMP, but globally. There would be no functional technology that involved electrics. In essence, losing all electrics would in turn stop communications, then logistics, and then fundamental infrastructure like food distribution, healthcare, and utilities other than electricity. The German Nazi army consumed massive amounts of Pervitin, a brand name for literal meth, and the company producing Pervitin made the pills till the 1980s, and the armies used Pervitin for drills until then. The Nazis also put Pervitin in chocolates to ease the dreaded life of a stay-at-home mother, and so on. Eastern Germany still has a huge meth problem, which is a whole lot less surprising knowing that it has been produced there legally up until fairly recently. The vacuum decay death of the universe. The basic Eli 5 premise is that it is possible that at some point in the universe itself started collapsing into a more stable version of itself, and once this started, the collapse spreads outwards into all directions at the speed of light. Because it travels at the speed of light, there is no way to know it's coming. You could literally stop existing the next second. This is strangely comforting, knowing you'd have no idea when it's coming, and it would be instantaneous, and no one would miss you. In the rainforest, there are around 1,000 unique species per 1 square kilometer. Each of these species, especially plants, can potentially offer new therapeutics such as antibiotics that no bacteria has developed resistance to. Any species can produce unique protein molecules that will never be replicated short of some kind of AI, with near infinite computing power that we could use for a large variety of therapeutics. These species will never evolve again. We have likely lost 820,000 square kilometers of just the Amazon rainforest since 1970, meaning we have likely lost around 820 million species and exponentially more than that in potential therapeutics. You can overdose on water. Basically, you dilute the normal chemical balance of your body so much that you can cause serious damage. It's called hyponatremia. In an EMT class, I heard a story of an old woman who bought distilled nutrient-free water, normally used for ironing clothes or something, because it was cheaper. She had to call 911, and it took a while to figure out the problem. During World War II, the Japanese would continuously experiment on the people they captured, like open a woman's stomach and see the baby, infect her with syphilis and see the effects, etc. Japan was never confronted about those war crimes. We still have no idea what consciousness is. Worse, we have not many ideas how to think about it. Just some philosophical ideas. Dene, Chalmers, etc. I mean, we don't know how to build interstellar ships, but we could write books and make movies about it. We could speculate about different approaches and ideas. For consciousness, it's not true. We don't know why it exists. What is I? What is the role of consciousness? How it emerges? And how to research it? And so on. A study by MIT in 1972 predicted that society will collapse one way or another during the 2040s. An economist in 2012 reviewed it, and he said, "We are right on track with their trajectory." They had many scenarios, but the one that is playing out is that population is making more and more land infertile, which makes it harder to grow food. If the prediction pans out, eventually we won't have enough food to feed everybody, which will start a series of events that will lead to the collapse of society. A fully loaded semi takes 2 football field lengths to come to a complete stop when they are over 45 miles per hour in dry road conditions. An empty semi takes even further to stop, so never brake check one. It will most likely cost you your life.